It is now my pleasure to introduce the Premier, the Honourable Kathleen Wynne. Premier Wynne has traveled the province, not sure how many kilometres she has racked up so far. I don't even know if she's keeping track of it, but let me tell you, she has covered a large portion, if not all, of our province of Ontario. And she's no stranger to municipal government, ROMA, or AMO. As a previous minister, she at one point co-chaired the Ontario AMO Memorandum of Understanding meetings. She knows what frank discussions are and our interest then and now. The provincial relationship with municipal governments and the associations that work on their behalf is critical. I don't believe Premier Wynne has missed any of our conferences since she was originally elected. You need to hear from the Premier, not me, but please note she told me at the very start she's going to have time for a few questions at the end. So if you have questions when the Premier's finished making her presentation, raise your hand and a microphone will be brought to you to answer her questions. With great pleasure, please help me in introducing the Premier of Ontario, Premier Wynne.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ron. Thank you very, very much. And it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you. And just to add to what Ron said, I am also coming back to be here for the Ministers' Forum as well. So if we don't get through your questions this morning, I'll be back for this afternoon. A glutton for punishment, she is. Thank you all for being here. And Ron, to you and the whole ROMA team who works so hard to bring everyone together every year, thank you. And you do that, I know, to make sure that rural Ontario's interests and challenges are heard, that they're understood, and that they are addressed. C'est un plaisir d'assister de nouveau à votre conférence et de faire notre part en tant que gouvernement par l'écoute et par l'action. Just before I go any farther, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territory of many Indigenous people dating back countless generations, and I want to show my respect for the contributions of First Nations and Métis people who continue to be essential partners in shaping this place that we call home, this beautiful place that we call home. One of the great privileges of my job, and Ron referred to how many kilometers I've clocked. I actually don't keep track because it's thousands and thousands. But the privilege is being able to meet people from every corner of our province and to be able to see what you see every day, that rural Ontario is made up of people who are so resourceful, who are so innovative, and so proud of their communities. I'm going to talk for a minute about Smiths Falls. And where's the Smiths Falls contingent? Are they here? You're calling them out. It's okay. But Smiths Falls is a town, like so many of your towns, that is constantly reinventing itself. Its accomplishments were recently highlighted by a journalist from Bloomberg who pointed out how Smiths Falls has always been on the cutting edge. In the 1960s, the town's RCA Victor plant helped spark Beatlemania in North America, and we could all sing along, those of us of a certain age. The band's vinyl single Love Me Do was pressed there. I won't ask you to sing this early in the morning. And then Smiths Falls became the chocolate capital of Ontario. And Hershey employed 750 people, and thousands more visited and toured the factory and took in that great smell of chocolate. But of course, what really caught Bloomberg's attention was this, that today Smiths Falls is, and I quote, the nation's pot capital. And that's just fine. I heard a woohoo back there. That's just fine with Mayor Sean Pankow. Canopy is now operating out of the old Hershey building, and the local economy is booming. And this past fall, 5 friends from Smiths Falls opened the town's first brewery, 4 Degrees Brewing Company. And a European boat company is expanding to Smiths Falls, offering multi-day outings along the Rideau Canal starting next summer. So all of that is the transformation that Smiths Falls is undergoing, and it's remarkable. But it's not unique. We are living right now, and this is not a comment about Ontario particularly. This is a global comment, that we're living in a period of rapid and accelerating change. And I don't know if any of you have seen Thomas Friedman's book, Thank You for Being Late. but he talks about the fact that we have actually reached a point where the pace of change has exceeded and is exceeding our ability as human beings to actually absorb that change. So we need to grapple with that, because that exponential change is affecting everything about our lives. And no matter what part of the province you come from, you're experiencing the magnitude and the acceleration of that change. So rural and urban, we are in this together. And in fact, we're sharing this, this moment globally because the change is so rapid. But we're in it together just as we always have been. We share in each other's triumphs, we benefit from one another's perspectives, and all through that, we hold the same core values, that Ontario's greatest strength is our people, and that every one of them in every community deserves a fair shot, no matter where they live. Now, it has always been my belief, and I've said it to many of you in different contexts, that government exists to do the things that we can't do alone, and by doing that, create a foundation of fairness. Because we come together, you know, I say to kids in grade 5 classes when we talk about taxes, because many of them will say, well, taxes are bad. They bring that from, you know, why do your taxes are too high, says the, you know, 10-year-old. But they're hearing that, and then we talk about what taxes are about, and I say, you know, could your family build a road alone, or a hospital, or a school? And of course we can't. We have to come together. And so that coming together and that creating that foundation of fairness, I think, is what government is about. And that's why I'm passionate about our children's schools. A strong, publicly funded education system is at the foundation of a fairer Ontario. So in the 1990s, when resources were being taken out of Ontario classrooms, I was not going to stand by and let the quality of our kids' education suffer. And so I stood up, I got involved as a young mom, and I took my first steps in political life at the local level as a parent activist first, and then as a school board trustee. And that was a time when the relationship between the provincial and local governments was under an enormous amount of strain. And I know that Minister Morrow will speak to more of that later this afternoon. But the reason I'm hearkening back to that time is that I want you to know that all of these years later, I'm still driven by those same goals. That is why I'm in politics. I want everyone to have a fair shot. And I've only grown more certain that the way that we do that is by working together. That's how we've grown as partners. It's how we've learned to listen. And it's why now, even when we disagree, and Ron said he doesn't think I've missed any of these meetings, I haven't. I have been here every single year as a minister and as premier, because I believe that even when we disagree, and in fact, especially when we disagree, that's when we have to talk it through and find solutions. So, last spring, when our government took a stand on behalf of workers and demanded fairness on the job, we sat down with you and we had good, engaging discussions. You told us, and I heard it in meetings that I was at, that the changes to scheduling wouldn't work for the way that you deliver essential services. So we clarified in the legislation that essential services are exempt from some of those new scheduling rules. You've also been very frank about the need to protect the vital role that schools play in your communities. And I really hear you on this, and I will say to you that since I was the Minister of Education, I have grappled with this. I have grappled with how do we make sure that communities and kids across the province have fair access to school buildings, not just to programs, because I think we have probably mastered that better than access to buildings. And schools matter. They matter not just to kids, but I know they matter to your communities, and you've told me that very clearly over the last couple of years. They matter to local businesses, they matter to family and the ability of families to have a reasonable commute, they matter to the local housing market, and they are at the heart of communities. So what we did last June was we pressed a pause on any new school closures, and I'll repeat something that I said here last year, and that is that the way we can move forward on this is by working together, not just in a vague, nebulous way at the government-to-government level. Okay, heels. There are cracks in the stage, sorry. And I'm pretty good at dancing around them, but that one got caught. School boards, and I've said this to them, and I say it to you, school boards need to work much more closely with each other, and boards and municipalities need to work together to find ways to accommodate students in their community. And that works very well in some places. So I'm not denigrating where it has worked well. But it doesn't always work. And so to help boards and municipalities to resolve situations successfully at the local level, we will provide, as a government, we'll provide revised guidelines to support local partners to make these decisions. You told us that we need to consider the impact of closures on student programming, student well-being, school board resources, and the economy of local communities. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to take all of those things into account, and we're going to look beyond the absolute number of kids in the classrooms. These new guidelines will make our entire system and your communities stronger. But again, they will mean that there will be an expectation that there will be good process at the community level where, you know, sometimes the outcome is a community hub, sometimes the outcome will be school boards sharing space, sometimes the outcome will be a better understanding between municipalities and school boards. Those are all options that could come from better collaboration. So again, I want to thank you for being a strong voice on that and a strong partner. The truth is that even though we're one province and we have interconnected communities and intertwined economies, the challenges that we face are not one and the same. And you know that better than anyone. Transportation is a great example of that. In rural Ontario, how you get from place to place is completely different from how someone living in a dense urban center does. There are different challenges, there are different needs, but the results need to be the same. No matter where you live, you need to be able to get around. That's necessary, but it's only fair. And so we've made some record-breaking investments in the roads and bridges and transit that connect us all, and we're working with you to make sure that no part of Ontario is left out of that transportation transformation. And earlier this month, we announced more bus services for people in southwestern Ontario, and that is in conjunction with increased bus service in the north, serving towns from Hearst to Red Lake. Right now, it is more important than ever that we keep working together to create the kind of Ontario that we all want to live in. And that is a place where everyone gets that fair shot that I was talking about. And that fair shot is at a better life. And you know as well as I do that we've always fought, we've always fought for this Ontario, for that fair Ontario. Fairness isn't a given. Especially today, it's not a given. As the nature of work and the economy continue to change, there's another report out this morning, I heard on the news this morning, an Oxfam report that is being issued in the run-up to the Davos conference, and the focus is on income inequality around the world. So we know fairness is not a given. And people in our province are struggling. They're anxious about the future. And that is something that I hear a lot about. Recently, a woman named Lise wrote to me. She lives just outside of Ottawa. She has 2 sons who are aged 25 and 22. And they didn't expect to be living at home in their 20s. But they can only find precarious work, part-time, minimum wage, no benefits. And I am absolutely sure that you know people in the same boat. And this is not what she imagined for them or what they imagined for themselves. And she said to me, and I quote, "Times have changed from when I was their age. It's very sad and frightening to say the least," unquote. And her question to me was, what was going to happen going forward? And I agree with her. It's scary. This is a new world with new challenges. And she wanted to know whether I could guarantee that the $14 minimum wage and then the $15 minimum wage would be implemented. And that was, we have the $14 minimum wage implemented, and we're on track to implement 15 by January 2019. But what is really striking is that if you look at the numbers, Our economy's doing very well, and the slide in front of you shows that. Job numbers are up. But that doesn't mean what it used to. The fact that the economy is strong does not mean today that that rising tide is lifting all boats. That is not happening. In these turbulent times, I think it's even more important that government be that force for fairness, that agent for change, because the assumptions that we might have made 30 years ago about growth in the economy, making sure that everybody is doing better, we just can't assume that now. So the truth is that if we want to lead a province, if you want to lead a province at this point, you need to be willing to stand up for people and confront those challenges head on. Not just when it's easy or convenient. These are not easy decisions. You have to stand up every single time. So what we've done as a government is create a plan to create more opportunity and fairness in people's lives. And the examples are the free tuition starting this fall. We made university and college tuition free for hundreds of thousands of students. On January 1st, people woke up in an Ontario where prescription drugs are free for everyone under 25, and workers woke up in a province where their wages better reflect their hard work. And as I said, the minimum wage is now $14 an hour and will rise to $15 an hour in 2019. That raise can't wait. It's waited long enough. No one who is working in Ontario full-time should have to visit a food bank in order to put meals on their table and look after their families. That's not the kind of province any of us wants to live in. Over the last few months, I've held a number of town halls. I've been speaking with people at these venues. Last week I had one in Ottawa. Later this month I will be in Thunder Bay. And the questions people ask me are varied. They're different from community to community, but they share a common theme. And that theme is, what are we doing to confront these mammoth changes in our society? Because change, it's not like change is coming at us. It's here. It's upon us. So how can we help people get a better education, get better jobs, and a better paycheck? Because that secure, inclusive economy is actually our advantage. How can we better deliver health care, and how can we deliver better access to transit? What can we do to build a brighter future for our kids, our grandkids? These are the questions that we have to answer. And I say we because you are people in decision-making roles, and we are in this together. Fundamentally, we believe in Ontario that it's our responsibility to help one another. That is a theme through our history, and it's part of our present. We're not perfect. We know that. But we have so much to be proud of here in Ontario, and so much potential. Ontario is a very special place. When I meet with U.S. leaders, and I've met with over 30 governors now as we talk about NAFTA and the changes that may come, that we want to ward off, because people in the United States, the leadership in the United States, and those governors I'm talking to, most of them are Republican, they know how intertwined our economies are. But once we have that conversation about NAFTA, they marvel at what we've built here. They really take in how we are doing more, not less, and how we're taking honestly, and we're talking honestly about what change means, and we're accepting it on our terms, and challenging the forces of that change. If there's anywhere that can figure out the best way to confront today's challenges, I believe that it's here. I believe that it's right here in Ontario. It is now, and we can only do that if we do it in partnership, because you have frontline knowledge and information that both the provincial and the federal governments need, and that's why working in partnership with you is a tenet of my role as Premier. So thank you very much. I look forward to your questions. Merci. Miigwech. So we've got a mic here, and so if you have a question, you can, there's a question right here at the front.
My name's Judy Brown. I'm a councillor from the town of Perth in Eastern Ontario. We're only 20 kilometres away
Beautiful
from Smith Falls. Hello, Mayor Pankow. And we still have a chocolate factory. My question is, in addition to being a councillor, I'm also chair of the downtown BIA, Business Improvement Association, and talking to those business people, and they're having a huge struggle with the increase in minimum wage. Every one of them is saying they're going to have to do one of two things, or possibly both: lay people off or increase the price of their product. And so I see the result as being not positive, but net zero. So what I guess my question would be, yes, I can understand the need to make life more viable for low-income people, but why the huge increase all at once? $2.40 an hour is a huge hit for businesses. Why not do it more gradually, the way the province of Alberta did?
Well, thank you very much. And as you know, Alberta will be at $15 an hour by the end of this year. We're already competing with Seattle and New York. And so those are the jurisdictions we are competing with. And I would say to you, people have asked me, well, why, when we pegged the minimum wage to the cost of living, why didn't we start making larger increases then? And the answer is because the economy was not doing as well then as it is now. And we looked at that. We looked at doing a catch-up a number of years ago, and there was a lot of pressure from the business community not to increase the minimum wage more than an incremental amount because the economy was still climbing out of the recession. So that's kind of what I mean when I say that we've got competing realities here, where we've got corporate profits at all-time highs, we've got low unemployment rate in Ontario, lower than the national average and has been for many months, and at the same time we've got people who have not seen their real wages increase at all. So we are phasing this in over an 18-month period, and we're doing that because there will never be the perfect time to do this. But what we do know is that a few years ago, when the economy was not doing well, that was the wrong time to make this kind of increase. So that's why we've made this decision. And once it is increased to $15 an hour in January 2019, then once again it will be pegged to the cost of living. Over here.
My name is Jennifer Miltenberg. I'm a councillor in Ashfield, Colborne, Wawanosh, which is in northern Huron County, which is southwestern Ontario. Mm-hmm. I believe the living wage in our area is actually $16 an hour. And so I absolutely agree with the working poor, and we need to help them. I think that the frustration comes, and with this last speaker, is yes, it's very hard on small businesses, even with a spectacularly low corporate tax rate of 15% or whatever it is, which I, as a small business owner, think is really too low, but that's very unpopular, I get that.
Well, and we've just lowered the small business
yes.
rate from 4.5 to 3.5%, so we did that as well, recognizing, yeah.
So I think the problem is the economies of scale. So the effect of that wage increase on a small business owner with only a few workers is incredible. It's a per capita increase. It's a percentage increase, as opposed to, say, your larger ones, which have hundreds of workers, which are not as affected, I would say. Is there some way of, let's say it in real little words, tax the big guys and leave the little businesses? Like, make them go a lot higher?
So thank you for the question and the commentary. As I have said, there are real competing needs in some of these on some of these issues. Interestingly, I have talked to businesses of all sizes, so a couple of employees up to hundreds of employees, and there are businesses at each level that are either already doing this or are struggling. So it's a little bit of a challenge to get our hands around exactly what the panacea would be to help everyone. So the lowering of the small business tax rate was one thing that we did. We also heard about training costs, and so we've put in place support for the hiring of new employees, trainees, so that there is a bit of a buffer. And we'll continue to work with small business. I want small business to thrive, obviously, and as I said, there are small businesses that have already or were already paying above the $15 an hour. And so we need to figure out what it is exactly, what are the other supports, what are the other things that we need to do to work with small business. But I haven't heard anybody in all of the conversations that I've had, I haven't heard anybody say, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't have people earning a living wage. They will say, people need to earn a living wage, but, but I need support. But we believe across the province, pretty much unilaterally, uniformly, that everyone needs to be able to look after themselves. So I think that those are competing values. We'll continue to work with small business, and I appreciate the challenge. And when you opened your comments, you said that the living wage is $16 an hour, and that's the reality. By the time we go through the next 18 months, 2 years, the living wage will be closer to $16 or $17. That's true. It's way back in the corner, in the right-hand corner. Literally, a runner is coming at you right now.
Good morning, Premier Wynne. Mayor Steve Black, City of Timmins.
Morning.
I'm going to ask you a question which I think is the most important project to Northern Ontario at this point in time. As you know, Northern Ontario, across Northern Ontario, population decline, job decline is an issue. 4 years ago at this time, we were approaching an election, and you committed $1 billion to the Ring of Fire, which I believe is still there, and you're working through those issues, and I understand the complexity of the project. This year, going into the election, I want to ask, with 350, 400 jobs on the line for 50 to 100 years, are you willing to commit to a long-term energy price for Noront, similar to was committed for Cliffs Resources going forward for the ferrochrome smelter?
So you will know, Your Worship, that there's already work that is beginning to get the infrastructure built, the road infrastructure built. So we've made good progress over the last couple of years working with First Nations communities, because the thing that the businesses like Noront said to us was that they can't move forward unless there is infrastructure in place. So that's why it was critical that we start to get the work done on the roads. And we've got 3 or 4 First Nations communities now that are working with us to get those roads built. In terms of the energy prices, Mayor Black is asking me to make up policy right here in front of you and scoop my ministers and really irritate my ministers. So I'm not going to do that. You know, Mayor Black, that the conversations are ongoing, and you know that it's really important to us that that processing happen in Northern Ontario, and so we'll be working with the companies to ensure that can happen. And I will be back. Ron's coming up. I'll be back when my ministers are here this afternoon. So anything you didn't get to ask me, you can ask me later today. So thank you very much. Merci. Miigwech.
Well,
thanks, Ron.
thank you. Premier, I know I speak on behalf of all the delegates here today when I say thank you. Thank you for being present this morning and for the message you've brought forward. Reference to Smith Falls. My municipality is right next door to Smith Falls, and certainly we're going to share on what's happening there. So that just shows how expansion economic.